Step right in, tennis fans. Prepare yourselves, because the absolute spectacle that just unfolded under the desert sky at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden this evening defies all logic. The Italian phenom, Jannik Sinner, has officially resurrected. Stepping onto the hardened pavement of Stadium 1, he lugged the suffocating baggage of consecutive heartbreaking eliminations on his shoulders. Critics were practically screaming that Alcaraz was dusting him in the history books, echoing 12 agonizing months of whispers, asking if the golden boy we all adored had simply evaporated somewhere between the sands of Doha and the Californian desert. What we witnessed instead was nothing short of a masterpiece. 64 blistering minutes. That was the exact fraction of time required to shatter every single doubt, leaving the entire tennis universe utterly paralyzed as they struggle to comprehend the massacre. Let us peel back the curtain on this saga. We are diving deep into the battlefield fireworks, the shocked aftermath, and the massive shockwaves this sends through the remainder of the tournament. Grasping the true gravity of this evening requires a brutal look backward, pulling back the veil on the grueling, unseen realities defining Jannik Sinner's 2026 campaign over the past 3 months. For quite some time, a toxic storyline painting a champion in a total meltdown, depicting a warrior whose lethal instincts had supposedly dulled and fractured under the immense pressures of the previous year, has been polluting internet feeds and pundit broadcasts since the very first days of January. And with every single week that faded into the rearview mirror, that chorus of doom only amplified into a deafening roar. The true origin point of this vicious gossip traced directly back to that crushing semi-final defeat at the hands of Novak Djokovic down under. Touching down in Melbourne, he wore the heavy, glittering crown of a back-to-back reigning king of the hard courts. He landed there as the unstoppable force who had slammed the door on 2025 with a relentless brilliance, matching Carlos stride for stride in the race for supremacy and orchestrating a 12-month stretch he personally hailed as his ultimate masterpiece. Nearly every expert and spectator on the planet had practically guaranteed his ticket to the championship clash. Fate, however, placed a 38-year-old Serbian legend in his path, a veteran who summoned a godly, career-defining performance out of thin air, forcing our hero to surrender in 5 brutal chapters to an opponent practically ghosting the tour since the prior summer. Make absolutely no mistake, this defeat was far from a mental surrender or a tragic breakdown. Quite the total opposite, in fact. It was a 5-act gladiatorial war against a legend who, on that fateful afternoon, unleashed a brand of baseline wizardry unseen at a major tournament in ages. Yet, the scoreboard flashed a defeat, planting the poisonous seeds of skepticism. Following that came the desert heat of Doha, where his journey was shockingly cut short by Jakub Mensik during the Elite 8 stage. Facing the 12th-seeded Czech phenom, the very same rising star who conquered Miami a season ago, is no easy task, especially when that lethal combination of booming serves and laser-like flat ground strokes perfectly aligns. Unpacking this particular stumble proved significantly more complicated than rationalizing his epic war against the legendary Serb. Diagnosing the issue demanded a microscopic examination of the intense metamorphosis currently rewriting the Italian's entire tactical blueprint during this early phase of the calendar. His inner circle has never shied away from the truth, openly confessing that their camp is navigating a massive, chaotic phase of reconstruction. The objective is clear: injecting entirely unseen lethal weapons into an already devastating baseline arsenal. He is purposefully abandoning the secure, familiar strategies that crowned him a 2-time major champion and the supreme ruler of the rankings, choosing instead to forge an indestructible foundation meant to dominate the next 10 years of professional tennis. Betting on the future demands blood in the present, and the scorelines produced in the Middle East and Australia laid that painful sacrifice bare for all to witness. Meanwhile, the Spanish wonderkid Carlos practically burned the tour to the ground, hoarding the championship trophies in both Melbourne and the Qatari capital. Stretching his flawless 2026 run to an intimidating 12-0, he marched into the Californian desert wearing the armor of a reigning, back-to-back victor. His eyes were completely locked on obliterating Novak's legendary, untouchable modern-era streak of consecutive triumphs. The gaping chasm in sheer hardware collected between the planet's top-ranked gladiator and his immediate rival during the opening month and a half of 2026 was the most terrifyingly stark contrast we have witnessed since the Italian conquered the summit back in 2024. Vultures descended from the rafters, and the hot, reckless opinions multiplied like a virus across the sporting landscape. Public conversation, which historically lacks any ounce of grace when dissecting the titans of the men's circuit, turned incredibly brutal. Armchair analysts boldly declared that our protagonist was suffocating under a crisis far more severe than standard seasonal slumps, claiming the Czech defeat exposed a fatal mechanical flaw, while the Serbian war supposedly unearthed a hidden bodily breakdown. They spun a terrifying web, implying that the 2026 iteration of this young icon was, according to a legion of extremely loud but wildly guessing pundits, fundamentally stripped of the magic that previously secured him consecutive trophies in New York and the 2025 Parisian clay crown. Critics gleefully highlighted his tumbling mathematical standing, weaponizing his drop beneath his Spanish rival as absolute proof, citing his empty trophy cabinet during the initial 6 weeks of the tour. Others hyper-fixated on that sudden collapse against Djokovic, aggressively painting the stumble as a glaring, unprecedented fragility infecting his once bulletproof aura. Many simply weaponized the raw statistics, screaming about a 12-0 win streak against a pathetic 0-2 finals appearance ratio, blindly pretending that a handful of digits could ever paint the genuine, complex masterpiece of a professional athlete's true trajectory. Yet, utterly buried beneath this avalanche of panic was the vital truth, a reality the coaching staff had been desperately shouting into the void since the turn of the calendar, only to be drowned out by the noise. The Italian phenom was never crumbling. He was actively undergoing a dramatic metamorphosis. A highly calculated, painstakingly intentional evolution is being hardwired directly into his athletic DNA right before our eyes. It is a bold, uncompromising mission to forge new weaponry for a terrifyingly destructive armory, forcing him to abandon his safest survival instincts today so he can construct an absolutely unstoppable juggernaut for the decades awaiting him. But evolution inherently demands a heavy, agonizing toll. That ultimate price tag is paid in bitter defeats during this messy cocoon phase, bleeding crucial points because untested tactics misfire, triggering unforced blunders that the older, safer incarnation of his tennis identity would have effortlessly avoided. Calling it a crisis completely misses the mark. What we are witnessing is simply the brutal toll exacted on any athlete daring enough to evolve, a massive dues-paying moment that every legend inevitably faces. He took that harsh reality on the chin down in Melbourne, and he swallowed that exact same bitter pill in Doha. By the time he touched down in Indian Wells, his eyes held the absolute terrifying clarity of a man executing a master plan, knowing his exact endgame. The entire global tennis community was practically hyperventilating over Djokovic's so-called slump. Then he stepped into the California desert and ruthlessly silenced the noise, long before he even swung a racket under tonight's stadium lights. The murmurs echoing throughout the lever. The sport's inner circles were heavily fractured, a glaring testament to just how much toxic skepticism had poisoned the narrative surrounding his immediate future. During a tense broadcast on Tennis Channel Live, former pro turned sharp-eyed analyst Chris Eubanks faced a blunt question regarding his panic level over Sinner's current shape. He did not hesitate for a single second to set the record straight. He fired back, saying his worry was basically non-existent. Eubanks completely dismantled the panic button theories, wielding the grounded logic of a true trench warrior who perfectly grasps the massive gap between a career collapse and a completely standard performance dip. He swiftly reminded everyone that Mensik, the guy who stunned Sinner over in Doha, holds a Masters 1000 crown himself. He is armed with an absolute cannon of a serve and possesses the kind of lethal firepower required to dismantle absolutely anybody when the stars align. His prediction for the Desert Showdown was chillingly simple. We were about to witness a profoundly deadlier, hyper-focused version of Djokovic. Coco Vandeweghe chimed in on that very same broadcast, bluntly pointing out that a generational talent does not just wake up with amnesia and forget how to hit a tennis ball. She was quick to admit that even the most untouchable titans of the sport ride an inevitable roller coaster of soaring highs and crushing lows. Yet, her most piercing insight zeroed in on the sheer ruthlessness Sinner displayed mere moments after tasting defeat in Qatar. It was a split-second, monumental choice that offered a far deeper glimpse into his killer mentality than any scoreboard ever could. Fresh off the upset, he picked up the phone, dialed his coach Darren Cahill, and ordered an immediate evacuation to Indian Wells. No gap week, no pity party vacation, just straight back into the absolute fire. Touching down a whole 7 days ahead of his first clash, he buried himself in the blistering heat of the California wasteland, acclimatizing to the brutal environment and meticulously sharpening the exact weapons he felt had lost their lethal edge. He punished himself with grueling two-a-day practices, grinding through both the scorching afternoon sun and the notoriously bitter chill of the desert nights. Van de Weghe passionately praised his refusal to arrive late and make excuses. Choosing to show up early and suffer on the practice courts proves he is absolutely not spiraling, but rather enduring the agonizingly beautiful evolution of rebuilding his arsenal while desperately clinging to his apex predator status. He has hidden absolutely nothing about this grueling metamorphosis. Facing the media earlier in the week, he openly confessed his obsession with dictating play from the back of the court, candidly labeling his boot camp preparation as sheer torture. Endless, agonizing hours swinging a racket, countless weights lifted, with zero rest in sight. Yet, he ominously hinted that his rhythm felt dangerously dialed in. Then came Friday night. He stepped onto the grand stage of Stadium 1 and unleashed absolute hell, showing the universe what all that silent suffering had forged. What he did to his opponent was not just a victory, it was a cinematic execution that violently ripped up the critics' scripts in front of their faces. The challenger, sitting at 109th globally, had clawed his way out of the unforgiving qualifying trenches just to taste the main event. At just 23 years of age, he had already dismantled James Duckworth without dropping a single set in his opening skirmish. Marching into the second round here for the absolute first time, he carried zero baggage and the terrifying, unburdened freedom of an underdog facing the planet's second-best player. Let us be completely clear. This kid is nobody's stepping stone. He is a battle-tested gladiator who spilled blood to earn his Friday night spotlight, and as he openly admitted to the press, he fully understood the monster lurking across the net. He literally came of age witnessing both Sinner and Alcaraz violently climb up the ruthless junior ladders. They traded blows on hidden practice courts long before the media ever cared to learn their names. Back then, he saw Sinner as a wildly gifted but physically fragile string bean, bursting with unpolished magic. He was definitely not the guy you would casually bet on conquering 4 major championships before his 25th birthday. He looked back at the meteoric, godlike ascent of both superstars with nothing short of absolute awe. Hearing that praise hits incredibly hard because it is born from shared sweat, not a broadcasting booth. He lived through their origin stories. That brutal 6-1, 6-1 demolition is exactly what staring into the face of an evolved apex predator feels like on the battlefield. Those 64 agonizing minutes were never a competition, it was a public execution. Jannik shattered his rival's serve early in the first frame and hit the gas pedal, never glancing in the rearview mirror. He instantly rattled off a jaw-dropping 5-game killing streak, snatching the opening act 6-1 in a blinding 26 minutes, bleeding a microscopic 4 points on his own serve the entire time. Read that again. Just 4 points dropped all set. That lopsided final tally paints absolutely zero illusion of a competitive dogfight gone slightly wrong. It is the horrific aftermath of a hyper-lethal, dialed-in assassin systematically dismantling a victim utterly helpless against his suffocating barrage of overwhelming speed and heavy artillery. And precision his strikes unleash the moment his internal machinery is perfectly calibrated. Set number 2 mirrored that exact ruthless blueprint. Anchored at the baseline, Sinner orchestrated the rally, striking the sphere aggressively on the rise to lock his opponent in a state of endless desperation. Snatching another pair of breaks, he catapulted his lead to 4-0. This relentless Italian phenomenon had now strung together 9 victorious games in a row. Fighting off the dreaded double donut, Svarchinov finally managed to protect his serve, displaying the defiant spirit of a gladiator who simply refused to be utterly humiliated. Yet, the ultimate verdict remained untouched. Sinner slammed the door shut at 6-1, 6-1, capping off 1 hour and 5 minutes of terrifyingly precise, flawlessly synchronized, and absolutely dominant warfare on the court. A deeper dive into the raw data merely magnifies the absolute devastation hinted at by the final tally. Claiming victory on over 75% of his service deliveries, Sinner unleashed 25 scorching winners, leaving his rival in the dust with a paltry 8. He completely shattered his opponent's serve 5 separate times, while charging the net on 15 occasions and successfully finishing the kill 12 times. From every imaginable angle of the court, his execution was nothing short of a lethal dissection. He didn't erupt with the fiery, headline-grabbing electricity of Alcaraz, nor did he conjure up those theatrical, jaw-dropping moments of magic that turned the Spaniard's matches into pure blockbuster cinema. But instead, he unleashed a brand of terror that is, arguably, deeply far more chilling for any rival to confront. It's an agonizing, inescapable suffocation, a masterclass in calculated control where he dictates the exact coordinates of the exchange, pins his prey down, and delivers the final blow with zero wasted energy and absolutely no reckless gambles. When his arsenal fires at maximum velocity, opponents cannot find a single crack to breathe through. On this night, he starved his challenger of absolutely everything. The shockwaves of this masterpiece reverberated immediately across the globe, mirroring the exact magnitude of dominance the sporting universe had been anticipating. The official channels of the BNP Paribas Open couldn't help but label the onslaught as absolutely staggering, pointing out how the thousands packed into stadium. One stayed vibrating with electric energy from the first ball to the last, despite watching a clash that provided zero actual suspense, but served up an absolute feast of world-class shot-making to marvel at. Paying attention to how the organizers painted this victory is crucial, as it sheds light on a profoundly significant truth. Sinner didn't merely cruise to an easy triumph. He annihilated his opposition in a manner that violently reminded everyone exactly what his tennis looks like when the beast is fully unchained. There's an intangible aura to his masterclass when operating at absolute peak capacity, a terrifying grace that no stat sheet could ever capture. It's the crushing heaviness of his strikes, the unnerving perfection of his timing, and his suffocating court positioning that allows him to strangle opponents from every angle before gliding forward for the kill. It is that sheer mechanical efficiency, achieving absolute destruction without ever needing the dramatic flair or showmanship that his peers rely on to produce similar damage. When every single piston of that engine is firing in unison, exactly as it did this evening, his victory feels like sheer destiny. It paints the picture of a titan completely in tune with his craft, perfectly mirroring the very prophecy Coco van de Weghe laid out before the first serve was struck. Speaking in the aftermath of his defeat, Svechina provided the rare viewpoint of a warrior who has tracked the rise of both Sinner and Alcaraz, since their humble beginnings in the youth divisions all the way to the big leagues, granting him a uniquely profound vantage point on the monsters they have evolved into. He reflected on their early days, noting that while the raw, unbridled talent was always visible, Sinner was just a frail, lanky kid back then. Hardly the kind of imposing figure you would instantly bet your life on conquering the entire tennis universe. Yet, he admitted that witnessing the monumental evolution of these two titans has been nothing short of breathtaking. Hearing this from a contemporary who battled them in the shadows of the junior tour and now collides with them under the brightest stadium lights adds an incredibly profound, personal gravity to the tale. He isn't merely rattling off cold, lifeless data points. He is recounting a transformation he has personally witnessed unfolding over countless seasons, making that brutal 6-1, 6-1, drubbing the ultimate climax of a grueling journey under the dark Friday skies of the Californian wasteland. Furthermore, this absolute slaughter perfectly fuels the grand storyline that every fan at Indian Wells has been obsessing over ever since the brackets were unveiled earlier in the week. The Italian phenom's next obstacle in the third stage will be either the relentless Tomas Martin Etcheverry or the fiery Denis Shapovalov. The Canadian ultimately conquered the Argentine in a grueling three-set war, surviving a nerve-shredding tiebreaker in the deciding act. Given his explosive showing tonight, a masterclass boasting 43 blistering winners and a ferocious net assault that saw him clinch 15 points out of 22 daring charges, it is undeniably clear that the upcoming battle will offer a far more terrifying gauntlet than the absolute walkover witnessed in round 2. Sinner and Shapovalov currently sit deadlocked with one victory apiece in their rivalry. Their brutal 5-set bloodbath at the 2021 Australian Open remains the epic ghost that will haunt every single point they contest from here on out. Furthermore, when the Canadian Maverick catches fire, he can unleash a brand of wildly erratic, hyper-aggressive warfare that absolutely shatters the Italian's precious baseline tempo, a chaotic nightmare that conventional baseliners simply cannot manifest. Looking past this imminent third-round collision, the road to glory winds straight through the heavy-hitting Karen Khachanov, or the rising sensation Joel Fana in the round of 16, before a high-octane quarterfinal showdown against Ben Shelton, a rival the Italian currently dominates with a massive 9-1 record. Yet, despite that lopsided history, the explosive American poses one of the most terrifyingly unique athletic and strategic puzzles in the entire sport today. Wielding a lethal left arm and sheer brute force, Shelton thrives under the nighttime Indian Wells sky, where the frigid desert air turns his soaring serves and blistering ground strokes into an absolute nightmare to return. Should that highly anticipated quarterfinal clash materialize as predicted, It will absolutely be the fiercest battle Sinner must survive before a likely semi-final showdown against Alexander Zverev. But there is a much deeper story here regarding what a triumph at Indian Wells would signify, far beyond mere ranking points and a fat paycheck. He has already conquered 5 of the 6 Hardcourt Masters 1000 tournaments currently on the schedule. Yet, the crown jewel of the desert remains painfully elusive. He suffered heartbreak against Alcaraz during the semifinals here in both 2023 and 2024 and was completely sidelined last season following his suspension. Securing this particular trophy would be the ultimate missing puzzle piece, officially completing his absolute dominance across the entire Hardcourt Masters 1000 series. This happens to be a deeply personal milestone that his inner circle has openly circled as a monumental objective. Hoisting that trophy demands conquering 6 challengers over a grueling fortnight on a surface where a semi-final run is still his highest ceiling. However, the unstoppable force who orchestrated that blistering 64-minute masterclass tonight absolutely possesses the firepower to obliterate this draw, leaving naysayers with absolutely nothing to stand on. All of those monumental battles await in the future. Tonight was merely the prologue. What this evening proved beyond a shadow of a doubt is that this opening chapter completely shatters the ridiculous downfall narrative pushed by endless gossip over the past 8 weeks. A warrior who touched down 7 days early, grinding through punishing 2-a-day practices under the scorching California sun and freezing desert nights, totally immersing himself in the environment with the laser-focused intent of a man on a very clear mission before marching straight onto Stadium 1 to absolutely dismantle the world. Number 109th qualifier is definitely not someone who suddenly lost his racket magic. This is an athlete who has been meticulously plotting a massive resurgence in the shadows, and tonight, he showed every single spectator exactly what happens when flawless preparation meets a grand, high-stakes arena. That astonishing 33-0, flawless opening round streak, dating back to the summer of 2023, stands tall beneath this victory as an unbreakable foundation that no amount of toxic online chatter could ever crack. 33 spectacular opening acts, completely unblemished by defeat across every imaginable court type and competitive tier, stretching right through a turbulent phase that cynical critics weaponized as absolute proof of his downfall. A staggering track record of that magnitude completely destroys any illusion that this gladiator has lost his lethal bite. Instead, it paints the picture of a prodigy who, when staring down the barrel of an opening round fight, has not blinked or surrendered a single ounce of his legendary icy nerve in over 2 years. The detractors, or rather, the relentless skeptics, screamed from the rooftops for 6 agonizing weeks. Yet, underneath the lights of Stadium 1 at Indian Wells this Friday evening, he violently silenced them all in just 64 magical minutes. But there is one final, crucial element to dissect before wrapping up. It involves the heavy emotional undercurrent of tonight's return, far beyond the scoreline itself. Speaking directly to the crowd, he expressed pure joy about stepping back onto this very soil after last year's absence, raving about the absolutely electric energy the Indian Wells faithful always deliver. His words carried the profound, heavy relief of a beloved champion stepping back onto a stage he was totally shut out of, trapped by circumstances that were immensely agonizing and tangled, an ordeal that this brilliant California crowd, to their absolute credit, has beautifully chosen to forget. They welcomed him back with a roaring, golden embrace, completely echoing the overwhelming joy of an arena thrilled to witness his return, offering absolute, unconditional support. That type of thunderous embrace is deeply profound. Stadium audiences at these mammoth events are notoriously unpredictable. They can be incredibly ruthless, often tearing off old scabs and reminding a competitor of dark times they desperately want to bury. But the spectacular Friday night crowd in the desert did absolutely none of that. They showered Sinner with the rare, unbridled love every single competitor craves yet almost nobody truly receives. He absorbed every drop of that affection, delivered 64 minutes of absolutely spellbinding shot-making that rewarded their unwavering loyalty, and confidently strode out of Stadium 1 looking every inch the menacing world number 2 he truly is. Sitting on 4 magnificent major titles at just 24 years of age, holding an 8-2 seasonal record, and staring down the most prestigious hardcourt gauntlet on the tour. He is not broken, he is not a ghost of the past, he is absolutely not fading away. And somewhere amidst the roaring magic of the Indian Wells tennis garden on a spectacular Friday night, that legendary 33-match opening round winning streak quietly rolled straight over to a breathtaking 34. Not a single soul in the stands will catalog this specific bout as an all-time classic thriller. Yet every single person who witnessed the magic unfold will forever carry the electric atmosphere it sparked. The undeniable aura of a titan who was buried far too early, aggressively tossed aside by doubters, and boxed into a false storyline that clashed spectacularly with the truth. Boldly reclaiming the very battleground that currently holds the key to his legacy, and delivering a terrifying wake-up call to the entire tennis universe about exactly what unfolds when Jannik unleashes his fury. And that wraps up our incredible story for today. It was an absolutely mesmerizing showcase of power, proving exactly why he does not bow down to Alcaraz in the slightest. Drop your wildest thoughts in the comments and let me hear exactly how you felt about this spectacular return.